What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host. I am joined today by a good friend. I think this is the first time that we have ever been able to get on a mic together, and we have known each other for years. That is Jared Wackerly. He can be found on Twitter at Jared Wackerly FF, and he is all of his work can be found over at Dynasty Nerds. Jared, finally, so good to get on the mic with you, my friend.
And it's been a long time coming. I appreciate it. Finally, we're here. So thank you.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you have young kids as well. We talk about dad life. We talk about this all the time. Have you been listening to the Encanto soundtrack as
Dude,
much as I have
I
currently?
was wondering if we're going to come into Can't Talk About Bruno or Surface Pressure, whatever that song is. That's the best song on the soundtrack. But oh my God. Yeah, we listen to that all the time, every single day.
It is on repeat. And it's the worst thing, but it's the best thing is that I literally will wake up with one of those songs in my head, like immediately open my eyes and I immediately have one of the songs stuck in my head.
I
But
saw
it's
it on
just,
your Instagram story today.
yeah, I mean, it's genius. It's genius. The soundtrack is amazing. My son loves
It
it.
is.
We
It's a
listen to it all the
great
time.
movie.
It is. So, all right. Well, we obviously don't talk about Bruno, but here on the Dynasty podcast, we talk about incoming rookies. And so we are going to dive into that here today and leaning on Jared's experience here and taking a look at some of the early takeaways here as we dive into the 2022 class. So before we do that, though, I want to remind everyone that we have the giveaway going on courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction. That is a Najee Harris signed jersey giveaway. All you have to do to enter this is subscribe to our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/fantasypros, where you can be watching this podcast as well. Subscribe. That's all you have to do. Then go over to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest, fill out the short form there, and attach a screenshot of your subscription to be entered. Again, that is going to youtube.com/fantasypros. Subscribe, then go to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest for a chance to win a Najee Harris signed jersey giveaway courtesy of Pristine Auction. All right, Jared, let's dive into this 2022 class. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording where for me, I'm trying to play catch up, man. Like I am just trying to dig into after the grind of the fantasy football season and everything that we had to do there and trying to catch up with evaluating these 2022 prospects. And so I know that you have been way ahead of the game here with a lot of these guys. So I wanted to bring you on and let's talk about the running back position here first. And what I will do is I'll ask you a question here, kind of tee it up for you, and lean into that, and then give me some of your main takeaways. So, with the running back here, how does this class compare to previous seasons now that you've gotten a chance to really dive into it? And who are some of the names that we need to be paying attention to and watching as we move throughout this draft process?
Yeah, so every year, Garrett Price and I put out our nerd score on Dynasty Nerds. So we rank all of the players, the prospects coming out in the rookie drafts. We give them all a tape score, and we do it before the draft happens. So that allows us to go back and kind of see how each class is stacking up with each other. So right now, the only guy that I have in my top 5 when you combine the last couple classes together is Breece Hall. But the nice thing about this class is there's 2 or 3 guys that project as being a workhorse type running back. You know, they have good size. They've produced since they were freshmen, and that's Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller, and Breece Hall. All 3, I think, can come in and demand 15 to 20 touches. I don't think there's any first-round running backs in this class, but I think Breece Hall could go in the second round, even Isaiah Spiller, and I project Kenneth Walker to be more of a third-round type guy. And then you get in kind of deeper with Rachaad White, Kyron Williams, who I really like, and I think you like a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's good depth in this class. I don't think there's any elite type running backs like Jonathan Taylor or a Najee Harris, who I liked a lot coming out last year.
So I think that's been the thing where we look at previous classes and we can say, okay, we've got a Jonathan Taylor, we've got DeAndre Swift, we've got these guys who seem to be locks for the 101 in rookie drafts, right? We just kind of lock them into that position. We say, okay, the landing spot could adjust which one we take, right? Is it going to be DeAndre Swift? Is it going to be Jonathan Taylor? I don't necessarily feel like in my early dive into this class, and it kind of sounds like you're saying the same thing. There's not necessarily one of those guys that we say they're a lock for the 101. So in looking at that, would that guy be Breece Hall for you? If we say like at the 101, we think that it's going to be Breece Hall that's worthy of going there?
Yeah, and it's January. You and I talked
Right.
before that we still have a lot of tape review to do, but at this point, it would be Breece Hall. I think his skill set and what he did in college is just undeniable. I mean, he runs with power. He's got great patience, great vision. He's very quick. He really doesn't have any long speed, so people kind of knock him for that because he's not like Jonathan Taylor. He's not just going to take it to the house 4.3, 4.4 speed. But I think he's just so savvy, so good in between the tackles. He can catch the ball well. So depending on where he goes, I think he would be the 101 because, everyone loves to take their running backs there early because they can come in and just produce for you right away. And everyone needs a running back all the time. So, but this class is really good at wide receiver. So, I mean, I think this could be a year where we see either like a Treylon Burks go 101, maybe Garrett Wilson. A lot of people have him at wide receiver 1, but I know we're not getting the wide receivers yet, but this could be a year where you see that happen.
Well, it's definitely pertinent as we're talking about that 101, and if it's going to be the running back that's locked in, and this is in the conversation of one QB leagues, right? Superflex is
Yeah,
a different
right, of
conversation,
course.
but in that one QB format, having a guy like Breece Hall there be in consideration. Now, you talked about Kenneth Walker, and you said that he could be the guy who walks into 15 to 20 touches. I just finished up my tape evaluation of Kenneth Walker just the other day. So I absolutely love him from a talent perspective. It's undeniable for him moving from Wake Forest over to Michigan State this year. And I'm a Spartan fan. So getting to see Kenneth Walker up close and personal and hearing just how much he dominated throughout the year was something else here in the state of Michigan. So with Kenneth Walker, though, he's at 200 pounds is what he's listed at. So with the 15 to 20 touches, that's something that I have concerns about. A guy who I comped him to as I was watching him was Devin Singletary, looking at Kenneth Walker and comparing him to Devin Singletary. And Singletary has handled that significant workload, but it's taken a lot for him to get there. So do you expect that? Like with Kenneth Walker, you said, I think round 3 grade, like, do you expect that he's going to be drafted in round 3 and he's going to walk into minimum 15 to 20 touches? Or is the situation really going to have to matter for how we value Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, I think for any of these guys, the situation is going to have to matter, and especially with Kenneth Walker because he is a little more undersized than those first 2 guys I mentioned. I have him listed as 210. You said 200. We'll see. We'll see what he weighs in at the
Right.
combine, but he definitely is like a slighter, more slender frame. Now, I think he runs big. I think he runs big
Hmm.
behind his pads. He has good contact balance. I think he's more explosive than Devin Singletary, but he
Hmm.
does have that wiggle like Singletary had. We didn't really see Kenneth Walker catch the ball out of the backfield much in college. So, when doing my tape study, I did see him catch the ball and he looked fluid doing it.
Right.
So, I mean, it was like Jonathan Taylor. We didn't see him do that much in college until his senior year. So, who knows? I try not to put too much stock into not seeing that. So that could hurt him as far as getting 15 to 20 touches. But I think Kenneth Walker would be more than capable of having that type of workload.
It's interesting. You mentioned that 210, 200.
Mhm.
That doesn't sound like a big difference, but when we're evaluating running backs, that is a massive difference to
Yeah.
have because the different types of builds, and it depends too. Is it a dense 210 or is it more right? Like there's a
Right.
difference there as far as the running back and that leading to volume. So I think that's going to be one of the storylines as we move up into the scouting combine and having Kenneth Walker weigh in is going to be like, what exactly does he weigh in at? How does he test at that size? It's going to be interesting to watch. Before we move on from the running backs, I did want to ask about one final guy that you didn't really talk about, but I do want to ask you because when I think about the workhorse back in this class, there's a guy who really did not get that workload in college, but I do think that he has the size to be able to do it. And obviously his name is Zeus. Like he has the potential to be that. So Zamir White out of Georgia, is this a guy that you think could walk into the NFL and handle a 15 to 20 touch workload from day one?
I think he could. He projects as that type of runner. He kind of reminds me of a little bit like Damian Harris for New England, and a guy that's really high on Zamir White is Garrett Price. I know he's your good buddy too. He's another guy over at Dynasty Nerds. Him and I do the tape scores together, and he's been high on like DJ Dallas the year before and then Jarrett Patterson, and he's always got these running backs. And Zamir White's that guy for him this year. So, I mean, he's good between the tackles. He was the number 1 recruit coming out of high school at the running back position. And then he had a couple ACL surgeries that kind of
Mhm.
held him back. But when he gets the ball, he's done a really nice job. Now, Georgia gave it to James Cook, Zamir White, Kenny McIntosh, and they're Kendall Milton So they had
Yes.
like a four-headed monster in the running back at the running back position this year. So he didn't get as many touches, but I could see him coming into that type of role at the NFL. And I was hoping he was going to go to the Senior Bowl, but he's not going to be there next week.
All right, let's move over to the wide receiver position, and a lot of interesting names here. And we talk about guys right off the top. You mentioned Treylon Burks out of Arkansas, Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State. We got Drake London out of USC. The top tier talent in this class is incredible. But the
Mm.
question that I'll ask you right here off the top is, how does the depth of this class compare to previous seasons, where we might not have necessarily someone who compares to Jamar Chase or is going to grade out higher than Jamar Chase in this class from last year, but what does the depth of this class look like overall?
I think it's pretty deep as far as going, if you're in a super flex draft, I think all the way down to like 2-6, you're still getting a pretty valuable receiver. And that's if you like David Bell or George Pickens, who was the wide receiver one for a long time in this class for a lot of people. And then he tore his ACL. So he came back during the playoffs. He made a fantastic catch against
Yeah.
Alabama down the field. And you just saw the ability to go and get the football. So I think he's a guy you might be able to get later in the draft. Jameson Williams tore his ACL. He's my wide receiver one still. And John Mechie, he's another solid receiver that I think could play the slot role at the next level, or Wendell Robinson. I mean, the list goes on. I think this is a pretty deep class. I don't think we have any Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith or a CD Lamb type guy, but we do have guys that have a very high ceiling and a lot of potential, like Treylon Burks, Jameson Williams.
All right. So you mentioned the tape score that you do there at Dynasty Nerds with Jameson Williams, who is your wide receiver one. Where does he fit in some of those previous classes with 2021, with 2020, which are, I mean, even 2019, they're star studded classes. Where exactly does Jameson Williams fall in that tier for you?
Yeah, so right now I have him at 6. So he's right outside the top 5 when you combine 2020, 2021, and 2022. So Jameson Williams, Treylon Burks, and Garrett Wilson are 3 guys that are in the top 10 when you lump those 3 classes together.
It's crazy with Jameson Williams, obviously, with him spending the first 2 years of his college career at Ohio State, could
Yeah,
barely get onto the field and then moves over to Alabama, puts up, I think, over 1,500 yards this past year, like
yep,
just absurd production. And then you wonder, like, okay, why couldn't he get onto the field at Ohio State? And then you realize, okay, he had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba all above him. Just
yeah.
ridiculous. And then, of course, you got Marvin Harrison's, son there too. So it's crazy. So let's talk about one of the guys that I just talked about in that list, Chris Olave. What are your opinions here on Chris Olave? Because I feel like Olave is going to be one of the most divisive names as we move throughout this pre-draft process on draft Twitter, within scouting communities, stuff like that. I feel like opinions on Olave are going to be split. So I want to just
Yeah.
tee this up for you. What are your thoughts on Olave? What did you see when you scouted his tape?
I like Chris Olave. I don't have him in my top 5 receivers, but I could see him going in the first round. He's very smooth. He's very fast. He runs great routes. Has a great release package. I love guys that come from Ohio State because I think Brian Hartline does a fantastic job
Yeah.
at developing those wide receivers and getting them ready for the NFL. So I think it's going to be more of a landing spot dependent type thing because I don't see Chris Olave projecting as being like an alpha wide receiver or wide receiver one that's going to command a ton of targets. But if you were to land somewhere with a really good quarterback like Justin Herbert in LA, or paired up with like an Aaron Rodgers, or a team that's going to air it out a lot, I think he could be a nice wide receiver too and get 5 to 6 catches a game. And he's gonna be taking the top off the defense, and he could have some touchdown upside there.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that is really interesting because you don't expect this type of crazy speed from him, but when you watch his tape, you see him being a true three-level threat. With his route running ability, he's able to get open
Yeah,
underneath and then on in breaking routes in the middle of the field to then on posts on go routes. He's able to get open deep downfield. And so if you pair him with the right quarterback, I do think that he could be a fantasy football star. I do think that that's in the realm of possibilities there for Olave. I don't think that he's going to be someone who necessarily creates a ton on his own. I do think that he's going to have to be situation dependent and try to make the most of that situation. But the talent is there. And I remember talking with you, I think back in 2020 when we were Olave was kind of slated to come out in that draft. He ended up
yeah,
making a late return. And I made the comp to Emmanuel Sanders with Chris Olave, saying
Yeah, I
like,
remember that now.
I
Yeah.
feel like Olave is just kind of in this vein where Emmanuel Sanders was never a locked in wide receiver one for a team, but he was a damn good wide receiver two for
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of NFL offenses. A guy who's just crafty, able to get open at will, make contested catches, make those tough grabs. I think that that's Chris Olave's game. All right. Anyone else here at the wide receiver position before we move on to quarterbacks?
I like Jahan Dotson from Penn State. He's 5'11", 185 pounds. And for his size, man, he goes up and gets the
It's
ball.
crazy.
Yeah, possibly the best, probably right behind Garrett Wilson in that type of category. He has great hands. He gets open very well. He's very smooth. He was supposed to be at the Senior Bowl next week, which I'll be there next week covering it for Dynasty Nerds, and I was really hoping to see him, but he just backed out. So Jahan Dotson's definitely a name to keep an eye on.
It's crazy. You think about Jahan Dotson and you think about him when you have watched his tape previously. In my mind, I was like, yeah, he's like 6'2, 6'3. Like that was just kind of the because of his catch radius, because of his
Yeah.
ability to go up and make these ridiculous catches. And then, yeah, he's like 5'10, 5'11. Like he is
Hmm.
not a big bodied receiver in the vein of like a Drake London. And, Drake London really quickly, 6'5", 210 pounds, just finished up his tape study the other day. Really, really impressed with him. You
Me
do
too.
not find guys who are 6'5", 210 pounds who move the way that he does.
Right.
Incredibly athletic, incredible start stop ability,
Hmm.
and even like quick twitch for his size. He's
I
able to
agree.
be a threat after the catch, which is something that you just do not see with guys who are 6'5", 210, able to play above the rim like a Mike Evans, but then can make people miss in the open field.
He plays physical too. Like he'll come at you like just like Michael Pittman, who also came out of
Mhm.
USC. He reminds me of him a little bit.
USC, I mean, it's just been cranking out receiver prospects. So you had Michael Pittman a couple years ago. I mean, Juju years before that.
Yep.
Then Amon-Ra St. Brown last year. Like, I just love USC wide receiver. You talk about Ohio State receivers, and I've got just like this soft spot for USC receivers. I think they're so well coached. All right, let's move on to the quarterback position, and this is one where it's been well discussed up to this point already. At the end of January, we have talked a lot about this quarterback class and heard a lot of people say, "All right, well." It doesn't match up to in previous classes and stuff like that. But does that mean that it is a bad class just because it doesn't stack up well against last year where we had Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance? I mean, even Mac Jones, like that was an incredible rookie class for quarterbacks. Just because it doesn't stack up to that class, does this mean that it is an overall bad class?
Yeah, and like we thought last year's class was supposed to be just locked and loaded like fantasy studs, but they kind of underperformed this year for
Hmm.
what they were supposed to be. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think from a fantasy football perspective, we just need to be worried about how many first round quarterbacks are there going to be. And if you look at all the mock drafts, there's usually either 4 or 5 quarterbacks getting taken in the first round. So I think there's a ton of value there for us as fantasy football players and dynasty players. And I think in super flex drafts, it's going to push value down the board this year, just like last year. And in the middle of the second round, you're going to be sitting there and you might even have a quarterback available to you. I think Mac Jones, most drafts I was in, he fell to the end of the first, early second. So
Hmm.
I think it's going to push down a ton of value for us.
So one of the names here at the top of the class, and I'll ask if he is your QB1, is Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. And looking at Pickett from this past year and the production that he had, it's undeniable that it was just a phenomenal season. One of the guys that we talk about every year, we're like, well, one of these guys is going to come out of nowhere. It's going to be a Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray situation. One of these guys is going to emerge. And that was Kenny Pickett this year. I just finished up his tape evaluation the other day, came away incredibly impressed. Now, I don't think that he is going to be one of the guys who steps into the NFL and continues to develop and just become, excuse me, just becomes a top 5 NFL quarterback. But
Mhm.
he is going to bring an incredibly high floor right from the beginning. He's someone that I comp to Derek Carr. I think that
Mhm.
he is like from a talent standpoint and just what he brings to the table. I think that that's a pretty fair comparison. So, is Kenny Pickett your QB1? And we'll just start the conversation there with your overall takeaways from him.
Yeah, I love Kenny Pickett. I've been high on Kenny Pickett for like 3 years now. I remember Thor and I thought he was coming out last year. And before the 2020 season, Thor Nystrom put out a tweet, said, "Who's going to be this year's Joe Burrow?" And I tweeted at him, Kenny Pickett. And then like 2 years later, it finally came to fruition. I love Kenny Pickett. I think you know what you're getting if you're an NFL GM right away. He ran a pro style offense under Mark Whipple there at Pitt, put up incredible numbers. And I think he's a better athlete than what he gets credit for. I mean, he
Oh
can get
yeah.
outside the pocket and move. I'm not comping him to Aaron Rodgers at all, but I think his ability to make plays on the ground reminds me of Aaron Rodgers. He can make out all the throws that you need him to do. He throws the ball well under pressure. He makes checks at the line of scrimmage. I really like Kenny Pickett. He's a little bit older. I think he's 24. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's gonna be a 24-year-old
Yeah.
rookie. Yeah. So I think you're getting what you know what you're getting with him.
All right. As we look down the board at the rest of this quarterback class, is there anyone out there that you say, this is one of my guys that, based on the tape study that I've done, this is one of my guys outside of the Kenny Pickett's? Maybe, I mean, outside of Kenny Pickett, it is just it's a crapshoot as to
It
who's going to be
is.
QB2. So is there
Yeah.
any one of these guys that you have studied that you're like, this is my guy?
I'll tell you what, man, I really like Malik Willis. I like his skill set. I think he does have some work to do as far as decision making. He took too many dumb sacks last year. He threw too many dumb interceptable balls last year, but he makes some tight window throws that make you say, wow. And he gives you that ability to make plays with his feet. Kind of reminds me of Jalen Hurts in that way.
Hmm.
So I like Willis. I like his upside that he gives you, but I also really like Carson Strong,
Okay.
who I saw you just mocked at the end of the first round in your latest
Hmm.
mock draft that you put out recently. Where did you have him going?
Oh man. All right.
It's like
I had him,
31,
I was,
32.
yeah, right in there with, I
I
think I
think
had him going to
Detroit.
Detroit. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it was their second first round pick, and I
Yep.
think that'd be a great spot for him because then he probably would sit behind Jared Goff due to the money he's owed next year.
Hmm.
He can make all the throws. He's another guy that I think can come in right away if he's needed and start because he was asked to do a lot at the line of scrimmage, making checks, making sure his team is in the right position in order to succeed. There's not a lot of quarterbacks in this class that were asked to do that. Kenny Pickett and Carson Strong are two guys that were.
Those are two guys that in my summer scouting with Malik Willis, Carson Strong, those are two guys that I came away like saying all the raw talent is absolutely there. They have the arm strength, they have the ability to be able to make any type of throw on the football field. But there were significant steps that they had to make to be able to, in their development, for me to say, like, these are top five guys in my class. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I have not gotten to official tape study on Carson Strong, on Malik Willis yet, but they are definitely guys that I'm circling and saying, like, I'm excited to see, did they make those strides? And from what everything that I've heard, Malik Willis necessarily didn't, but you do see the raw ability. You do see the talent where if he has time to sit and learn, that he could be one of those guys that we talk about in the new vein of, the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, where you have the rocket arm, you have the mobility. That's what's so important now. We just saw what Josh Allen was able to do going toe to toe with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like that's so crucial now. We can see the path of that with Malik Willis. It's just that he's got to have a lot of development left to do before he gets there.
Yeah, and Carson Strong is the exact opposite. He is a statue in the
Right.
pocket. I think he has like 8 screws in one of his knees or something like that.
Jeez.
He didn't play his senior year in high school because of it. So there are some like medical concerns that could cause Strong to slip, but they're all going to be in Mobile next year, not next year, next week. Aside from Corral, so I'm real excited to watch them at the Senior Bowl practices next week.
All right, we'll have more thoughts, obviously, as we move throughout the offseason with the quarterbacks. Let's touch on tight end really quickly. And this could be as honest as saying, like, okay, Kyle Pitts, there's not a Kyle Pitts in this class. We've known that since the summer.
Yeah.
Is there a Pat Fryermuth in this class, though? Is there anyone that, based on your initial study, just kind of things that you've heard, is there anyone really in this class that you could say they could have the type of impact that Pat Fryermuth had in this rookie season? Or is it going to be like, okay, we have to wait with a lot of these guys when they get into the NFL, and situation is going to matter immensely.
Yeah, I will say I haven't dove. I don't know if the right word is there.
Dove?
I haven't
I
I
don't
haven't
know.
dug in yet on tight ends yet. A lot of them are going to be in Mobile next week, so I was kind of waiting on that. But just from playing Devi, playing campus to Canton, being a huge college football fan, and doing the little bit of homework that I have done, I really like Charlie Kohler from Iowa State. Big body, soft hands, not a great athlete, but he gets the job done. Really good red zone threat, I think. And then Trey McBride is just the
Mhm.
opposite. I mean, he's a really good receiving weapon at tight end from Colorado State. So those are two guys I think everyone should know their names.
Yep. And we will obviously have more information on them as we move throughout the offseason, guys. We'll break that down as we get into studying these guys. But just based on that, Jared, like just based on what you're saying, it doesn't sound like there's a guy that we're going to say, like, this is a locked in guy, someone that we have to target in our rookie drafts. It's going to matter what happens in there in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of second and third round tight ends, like a lot. I think there's like 6 or 7 guys that could go in the second or third round. But yeah, no Kyle Pitts from a fantasy football standpoint. It's hard to say like who we're gonna who we should be drafting at this point.
Absolutely. All right. So a running back class that doesn't necessarily have one of those Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swifts, one of those locked in guys, but overall pretty good depth and some guys that can make an impact for fantasy football. The wide receiver class doesn't have a Jamar Chase necessarily, but a ton of depth and a ton of really, really talented players. The quarterback class, obviously not comparing to 2021, but still some names that could make an impact. In tight end, TBD. We'll find out there. All right, Jared, thank you so much for taking some time out to come onto the podcast, man. I really appreciate being able to get the chance to talk to you on the mic for the first time here. So remind everyone what you've got going on over at Dynasty Nerds and where they can find and follow you online.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Kyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Jared Wackerly FF. I'm the producer of the Dynasty Nerds podcast, so check that out. We have the YouTube channel. We have a video form of the podcast. I also do my own podcast in video form on our YouTube channel, Dynasty Prospect Talk. I put it out once every couple weeks whenever I feel like it, really. But other than that, check out our nerd scores. We'll be putting out our film scores on all these prospects, Garrett Price and I, over at dynastynerds.com. So appreciate it, Kyle.
Absolutely. All right. Before we sign off, want to remind everyone that we have the giveaway going on courtesy of Pristine Auction. That is a Najee Harris signed jersey giveaway. To enter this giveaway, we talked about it earlier. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros. Then go to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest to enter. That's as simple as it gets. All right. For Jared Wackerly, I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.